Buddy by M.H. Herlong, Chapter 2. I started up wanting a dog the day after I was born. At least that's what I always tell people. We were living in a double, and my best friend Jamila and her aunt were living on the other side. For extra money, Mama was making pralines to sell out of the house and watching Jamila while Jamila's aunt was at work. We played on the front porch every day, and I remember every single dog that walked by, and there were a lot. When I was about 5 or 6, a boy down the street named Melvin had a yellow dog that chased a ball. Every day when Jamila and me got home from school, we watched him walk out with that dog and head to the park. We asked if we could come, but he said we were too little. I told Jamila I wanted a dog just like that. She drew me one on a piece of paper and said, "Here." Mama stuck it up on my wall and said, "That dog almost looks alive." I was thinking it was a good picture, but it wasn't that good. So, students, Little T wants a dog, and Jamila, his friend, draws him a picture of a dog. But that's not enough for Little T. He wants a real dog. But Jamila's a good friend, and she meant well by drawing a picture. When I was 7 years old, I told my daddy I wanted a dog. Mama was walking around with a great big stomach, and Daddy said, "We can't have a dog. We're planning to have a baby." I said, "I want a dog, not a baby." Daddy said, "You don't get to choose." When I was 9 years old, I told my daddy I still wanted a dog, and he said, "We got a toddler baby now. We ain't got room for a dog." When I was 10 years old, we moved down the street to live at Grandpa T. He said he had a big old empty house and couldn't work anymore because of his heart trouble. And what were we doing paying rent anyway? Mama had started cooking up lunches to sell too, so she could use a bigger kitchen. And to tell the truth, Grandpa T wasn't as strong as he ought to be. Jamila's drawing got all ripped up when we took it off the wall. She said she would do another one, but I said, "Don't worry about it. We got a yard now, even though there ain't hardly no grass." So I told my daddy we had enough room now, and I still wanted a dog. But he said times were hard, and he didn't have the money to feed a dog. When Mama's stomach got big again, I knew there wasn't no point saying I wanted a dog. We were going to have another baby, and there wasn't no more money than there was before. And since Christmas, there ain't even been as much. Jamila and her aunt just up and moved. One day, when the aunt came by after work to get Jamila, Mama started up showing off the little plastic bags she had just bought to put her pralines in. Each bag was just big enough for one praline, and each one said, "Mama's pralines," in this pinky red color. Mama took about 2 hours to pick out. She had just bought boxes and boxes of them, plus 2 rolls of ribbon to tie them shut. The aunt was standing there nodding and saying how nice that was going to look. Then all of a sudden, she stopped nodding and she said, "I need to tell you all something. We're moving to Chicago." I got a better job. It will be a better school. We're leaving this weekend. We were just standing there staring at her, and she said, "You all been good to Jamila for 10 years, and you're like family, but we have to go." Just before Jamila walked out the door, she turned around and waved. "I'll write you a letter, little T," she said, "and then you can write me back." And that's the last time I ever talked to her. So then there was nobody to ride the bus with, and nobody to do my homework with, and nobody to keep Tanya off when I wanted to play my Game Boy. Mama had spent all her money on those little plastic bags, and she didn't have enough. She didn't have anybody extra to babysit, just Tanya and Terrell. And you don't get money for babysitting your own children. I knew there wasn't no way in the world they were ever going to let me have a dog of my own. Then Melvin's yellow dog from down the street ran off, and I didn't even have somebody else's dog to look at anymore. I went in my room and laid down on my bed and didn't move for about a week. I just stared at the ceiling and thought that I should have let Jamila draw me one more picture, because then at least I would have that instead of nothing at all. So you see, students, little T is so desperate for a dog, he would have really appreciated just a picture of a dog, even another one that Jamila would have drawn. So now I'm walking on past the tomato man down the street toward the church. I'm thinking about how it's been over 3 months and Jamila still ain't wrote me a letter. I'm getting sweaty in my Sunday clothes and my shoes are getting dusty. And then I start thinking about how that dog put his nose in the palm of my hand. I start thinking about his big old eyes looking up at me. I start thinking about his broke leg and the way his ribs were sticking up when he was laying on his side. I hold my hand up to my face and I smell his smell all over again. Dog sweat, dry dust, and old wet leaves. Then I remember how the preacher always says, nobody knows what God's plan might be. So I decide right then and there, I better make a plan of my own. I look up at the sky just once, and then I get busy. And please click to see these notes I shared with you. I walk in at the church when they're singing. They're singing loud and they're swaying. The choir starts clapping their hands and everybody joins in. I walk down the aisle to where my family's standing. They're singing with the rest of them. When they see me, Grandpa T leans over to Mama and says, "Told you," but she don't look too happy about it. I squeeze in beside Daddy, and Tanya leans around and looks up at me and smiles real big. That girl sure is all teeth when she grins. When the song is done, we all sit down and the preacher starts talking about the meetings and committees and who's supposed to do what. But I'm thinking about the dog and wondering where he is. I poke Daddy and whisper in his ear. Daddy points and then I see him. He's laying up against the wall at the end of the aisle. Somebody's put a bowl of water by him, but now his head is down and he looks like he's asleep. I start to get up, but Daddy puts his hand on my arm and makes me stay put. While I'm looking at the dog, he lifts up his head and sees me, I swear I see his tail go thump. Then we come to the time when the preacher asks us to share our problems. Mrs. Washington, see that's a new character, is still worried about her nephew in Iraq, and we all pray for him. Mr. Bordeaux says his daddy is down in his back. He can't work, and all he does now is sit in his dark room watching TV and saying nobody needs him anymore. So we all pray for Mr. Bordeaux's daddy. One little girl stands up and says she's worried about her cat because it ain't come home in 3 days. We pray for the cat. Then I poke Daddy. He points to Grandpa T, who's already standing up. Grandpa T says he's got a story to tell, but he don't know how it ends. He says that's where he needs the help. He says, we're driving in the car to church this morning, and the family is all squeezed in because the car's too small and we can't buy another one. We ain't got the money. And the people say, uh-huh, or I know all about that. Then Grandpa T says, we hit a dog. Wham! And he clasps his hands together so loud, Tanya jumps, and the people suck in their breath and say, mercy! And Grandpa T is standing there looking at his feet and shaking his head. He says, this story would be over if that dog had died. But that dog didn't die. Praise God, somebody says. That dog is laying right over there, Grandpa T says. And he points. All the heads turn. That dog lifts up his head and looks back at the people. I swear he looks like he's about to cry. Grandpa T says the dog's got a broke leg. He says it's in pain. He says it's hungry. The dog puts his head back down. He closes his eyes. He turns his face toward the wall. That dog is one of God's creatures, Grandpa T says. We hurt him, and we don't have the money to help him. So how's the story going to end? How are we going to help that dog? Like the good Lord says we ought to. Sweet Jesus, somebody sings out in the back. The preacher says, how are we going to help Brother Roberts? And Mr. Nelson from the country stands up and he says his daughter works for a veterinarian and he'll help us get the dog there in his truck. And Mrs. Washington with the nephew in Iraq stands up and she says she can give $1 to help pay. And then other people stand up and say they can too. And before you know it, somebody's passing a plate and the dollar bills are rolling in and we're all singing again. And I'm thinking, maybe God does make his own plan. But so far, it looks pretty much the same as mine. So students, as you can see, this is chapter 2. They're in the church. Buddy is there, the dog, okay, eventually be named Buddy. And Little T's family is asking for assistance to help with the dog. We still don't know if Little T gets to keep the dog. Let's go to chapter 2 notes. And as you can see, the setting is Little T's house and the church. The new characters are Jamila and Jamila's aunt. The essential plot points, Jamila and her aunt moved to Chicago. Little T makes his first plan, make a quick prayer to keep the dog. Grandpa T tells the church members about Buddy and people donate money so that Buddy can go to a veterinarian. And Little T thinks that maybe God's plan is the same as his. We have an external conflict. Little T wants a dog, but Mommy and Daddy say no. Little T's family doesn't have the money to take Buddy to a veterinarian. But there is a resolution. There is a solution, okay? So here we have the conflict resolution. The preacher takes up a collection in the church, and enough money is collected to bring Buddy at least to a veterinarian. So for today, what you're going to do is a stop and jot question, okay? That's the stop and jot. And that will be on a Google form. It's a quiz. And then you will turn it in. And here is the question. Ever since little T was born, he always wanted a dog. Describe something that you've always wanted to have, but still don't have. Okay, thank you, students, and I look forward to your responses for this latest stop and jot question for Chapter 2.